Are you still in Florida? Oh.
No, I'm back.
We're about to be.
Yeah, no, I got back on Sunday night.
Well, on that note, welcome to the Trump Report, and very exciting to be coming to all of you live tonight from various secret locations, not that far from one another, but to react to tonight's vice presidential debate and a couple of interesting developments in the news since we did our last show last Tuesday, which is 8 days or 800
A lifetime ago.
Yeah.
800 years. It's a Yoda ago. But we'll get into all of that and start off talking about the VP debate. First and foremost, I am Christian Blatt, joined as always by Tamara Brown.
Hey there.
And Scott Moore. Scott.
Hey, guys.
So there are some big picture things to look at, some takeaways. I think I'll start by saying that, you know, especially after last week, when you see Mike Pence on the stage, you just realize it's like he is definitely like the politician's politician. In a different reality, he would be, you know, he would be a landslide win for president. You know, just to be like, if you were doing a movie where you needed a fictional president, he would definitely look exactly like Mike Pence. Like that's what like the president looks like in a movie. So I also think that if this were 1956, everything he said tonight would have been enough to sway the election in his favor. Ultimately,
also in 1956, it would have been in black and white, so you wouldn't have been able to see the pink eye.
That's true, but you would have been able to see The Fly, which I did write this on Twitter. I think it is patently unfair that Vice President Pence got assistance from Jeff Goldblum throughout the course of the debate. I don't think that that is something that we should stand for. And I hope that there is a full investigation. Shame on the Commission on Presidential Debates for not stepping in with a gigantic fly swatter, which would have been an amazing visual, by the way. Just a big fly swatter on Mike Pence's head. For me, I would say that Senator Harris came across oftentimes as very unlikable, but in the way where you'd be like, fuck, I wish he was my lawyer. You know, you're just like, yeah, that's what I want. I want that demeanor.
What was unlikable about her?
Almost everything. She
her gender, perhaps.
Yes, that's what I was getting at. I was offended by her gender. No, she's from she's definitely done the correspondence course from the Joe Biden School of Debate Prep, which is to shake your head and laugh as much as possible. And I think that some of which is very effective, but there was always, and you already know what the Maya Rudolph SNL sketch is going to be, is like, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking. Okay. Like that's the sketch right there.
or she's gonna go on and say the whole other line, which is, I will not be lectured by you.
Yeah, that's true.
She's gonna say that too.
That was a great. I thought that was a great part of the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you know, I think that the substance of what they both had to say resounded very strongly with each of their bases, and I don't know that it moves the needle in that way. The general consensus that I see is that the winner is the person that people already liked beforehand. The people that are saying that Harris easily won are the people who you would expect to say it. The people who are saying that Pence won. I do think that the moderation was much better than last week. But, you know, it's still, you do wonder if it could be like Showtime at the Apollo and you could have Sandman come and, you know, sweep somebody off the stage if they don't stop talking when it's not their turn anymore. You know, it's talk about studying at the correspondence school from the top of the ticket. It's like, well, you just keep talking. He was much more respectful of the rules and much more respectful of his opponent. But Those are my big picture things. Obviously, there's much more to talk about, but Tamara, your thoughts on the whole?
Well, I agree that this, I agree that, I think Kamala won, but that's because I am supporting her. It was definitely more of an adult night, so it was good to see that. It would have been nice if more questions had been answered, but I believe that Pence did dodge almost every question far more, even though Kamala did dodge questions. I think Pence definitely did it far more. She, I thought, did a great job. She stayed very measured. I liked the smiling. I liked the nodding. I pause at you saying she's not likable because that is exactly the issue when there is a female candidate, not that anybody has an implicit bias that I don't want a woman, in this day and age, nobody is saying I don't want a woman in a position of leadership. But because it is so rare to see a woman on that stage, on the debate stage, in a political arena like that, you just put her under such harder scrutiny. She's just so much further under the microscope than a man is. So that's why we say these things like, oh, she's not likable, I don't like her voice, these types of things, because it's a little unfair that the woman has to be scrutinized so much harder than the male candidate that we've seen every voice under the gamut for the past 250 years. She did have to do things like, I think if she had steamrolled Pence the way that he steamrolled her, that was something that Pence has the luxury of doing that, being a man. If she had done that, there would have been a lot more criticism of she's being, she's got an attitude, she's being, bossy, or, things like that. Things she didn't have the luxury of sort of just interrupting and steamrolling the way that he did. But I thought, it was they each said the talking points that reinforced everything that their base wanted to hear. And I can't possibly imagine what an undecided voter would want to hear from either of them. So it's hard to even say what would have been an appropriate statement. Maybe something to the effect of, I keep thinking like, it would be really nice to have a Democratic candidate acknowledge that the recession, it's not entirely Trump's fault. Like, the pandemic is not his fault. So the fact that we are in a recession, there's only so much that the administration could have done about it. But that being said, they did a horrible job of handling it. Like something like that, I do think might move the needle a little bit for somebody who was undecided. But that's not the way these things go.
Scott, just on the whole, your thoughts.
And I was going to say to Tamara's point, and on the flip side, they could also continue to bring up that the economy that Trump is kind of losing that edge on is not because of him either. He basically has had the same economy that he was handed to from Obama before COVID as well. So it would be nice if Democrats would bring that up in general too. But just top line, I would agree with you, Christian. I agree with both of you actually, because again, the way I think the way that Kamala had dodged the questions were more pronounced because Mike Pence kept needling her, whereas he dodged more questions and steamrolled over things more often than she did. But I would say, again, it's not going to move the needle that much. It was nice to see an actual debate and actually have them have some policy discussions. I do think Mike Pence was a lot more just blatantly rude in the interruptions. And a couple of times he was pandering, and he was doing that great, like we were talking about earlier, that great politician role where you hire that guy to play the politician from cast and crew, or central casting, because he just, even that whole thing with when he had responded to Kamala Harris saying, oh, I wouldn't take a vaccine if Donald Trump said to take it, I would take it if medical profession said to take it. And he did that whole like, oh, I don't know why you'd want to, politicize the issue of scaring people from taking vaccines. And it could not have been more clear what she said. So he was definitely doing that placating, pandering, playing that politician role. And he did that at several other moments throughout the debate as well. where he definitely knows how to play that politician to a lot better level than Donald Trump does. But obviously the bar was already set very low with Donald Trump last week. However, part of the main appeal of Trump is the fact that he's not a politician. He says whatever he wants. So in a lot of ways too, I think he got the bread and butter down for his base, but he's not going to help attract any other voters that either already don't like Trump or don't like Trump. And I don't think he helped at all in narrowing that gender gap right now, because any woman that was watching saw the way he interrupted and was pandering and everything else, that he's not going to help attract anybody else, maybe on the Republican side, really, like women voters in the suburbs that might have been possibly interested, that are still undecided or whatever. I don't think that he narrowed that gender gap at all. So overall, I think it's a wash. But I think if you walked away and said, did Kamala Harris look presidential? Susan Page had brought up that whole point of like, okay, Biden and Trump are both elderly for all intents and purposes. Could Harris step in? And I think she proved that she could. And I agree with Tamara. She was really on point. She kept her cool. She did her, mamala moments where we were saying earlier, I'm not going to be lectured. Would you please give me back my time? And again, she has to be better and above than anyone else. And kind of goes back to Michelle Obama. It's like if she wasn't smiling, she got the trope of being the angry Black woman. And so it's like Kamala Harris has to go above and beyond than anything than what Mike Pence had to do to have the same result. So, but overall, not going to move the needle really any at all.
Yeah, look, I think that each of them had some very strong moments. It is very pronounced when Kamala Harris nor Joe Biden would answer the question about packing the Supreme Court. However, she dodged a few questions. I don't know that there's a single question that Pence actually gave a straight answer to. I think eventually he came around on a couple of them and sort of said something, but some of the very, very specific things. And when I was thinking
and very important ones.
What's that?
Probably I'd say the questions aside from the Supreme Court question, I'd say the questions that he dodged were much bigger issues than the questions that she dodged.
Yeah, I mean, he gave a non-answer on what I thought was actually a good way to frame the question from Susan Page, that, what would you want Indiana to do if states were in charge of abortion? And he has a stock answer of like, well, I'm pro-life, so it's like, well, it doesn't actually answer the question though. What would you want to happen on the state level? So you always have to take the non-answer to mean it probably means exactly what you think it means. Is he makes the point about the packing the Supreme Court. I honestly don't think that's a hot button issue for Americans. I think people don't care if you pack the Supreme Court. I think that more people care about this actual nomination and confirmation process happening, but I also don't think it's the huge decider for a lot of people.
I don't think so either. So why are they dodging that question? Why do you guys think that they're dodging that?
Yeah, what do you think, Scott?
Well, I was going to say I that was an opportunity that I think she really missed, actually, and that was one of the weaker moments for me. Not even just dodging the question, because I believe they're still nervous because they want to attract some of those Republicans for Biden. They want to attract those conservative suburban women. And I think there's still a fear that if they blatantly say we're going to pack the court, which again, I don't think they really know that they're going to do that per se. Yes, it's something that's been talked about, but to blatantly say we're going to do that, I think would be a bit of a misfire, because they have no idea, and we have no idea what's going to happen over the next several weeks. We can guess, and we can make those assumptions and everything, but I don't think that that's 100% sure. But their fear, I think, is rightfully, to some degree, they don't want to scare away some of those conservative Republican voters that are open to voting for them if they're too blatant about it. However, the bigger question that I felt that she missed on her point was when she was talking about court packing, and she was just talking about judges being unqualified. Most people aren't going to care about that, but she didn't even bring up 2016 with Mitch McConnell. She talked about court packing for unqualified judges at the lower level, and she talked about Abe Lincoln in 1864, which has no relevance to today. And she really missed a good opportunity to bring up what Mitch McConnell did in 2016 and why we're at where we're at right now. And that's the bigger issue.
I think
that's why
I do think the Merrick Garland thing, which by the way, I like that President Trump referred to him as Merritt Garland, which I have done
Yeah.
many times. So the president is about as smart as I am. So, but that has come up a lot. So I do think that the Abe Lincoln thing was at least interesting because it's the exact same number of days. And he's like,
Yeah.
no, it's just not right. Hey, don't you like Lincoln? This is what Lincoln thought about that. So it's not like it's not like a huge gotcha, but it's like, all right, that's you get a couple of points for that. But yeah, I think that not give look, they don't have to give a direct answer. I think that they've decided that it's politically advantageous to dodge the question, and
Yeah.
that's their right. And because I think that committing one way or the other isn't going to help them. If they say we
Right.
won't pack the court, I don't think that they're going to get more votes than they would get. And if they said that, yes, we are going to pack the court, and so, yeah, I mean, I think it's more like constitutional scholars are fascinated by this, and people who talk about politics all day are fascinated by this. But I don't know that it resonates with the voters the way some things did. And, it did take her a little while to get around to the point, but about the federal judges, she's like, not one of them are black. But anyway, we know your boss isn't racist, right? And I think that in a lot of ways, Mike Pence is your like from the mold of politician, just add water. He's your instant politician. And he does himself tremendous disservice though, because his job is to normalize all of the absolutely batshit crazy things that you've gotten from President Trump. And he has to act like all of it's great and all of it makes sense. And he's talking about, what a strong leader he is. And, and ultimately though, this debate was just like, oh, it's just two people that have different approaches towards governing. It was not like the slap fight that Donald Trump, initiated last Tuesday. So I do think that there definitely were moments where you kind of would have wanted more, but I do think that they definitely held their opponent's feet to the fire a number of times. The most baffling thing, and Tamara, you tell me what you think about this, was how often Pence brought up the response to coronavirus when it is clearly like the single weakest issue for his administration. And
And
him being the guy in charge of it is like, yeah, that's not good. You did a really shitty job. Both of you did. And yes, a lot of things would still have happened the same no matter who the president was. Things would have happened sooner, but a lot of people still would have gotten sick. The economy would be shit. A lot of this stuff is the same. But you still are the one who was there, and you're the one who did the actual bad job. And it's always a good point to talk about the value of closing the border with China. But they both did this a little bit, but he did it more than she did, just beating the same drum. It's like, I heard you say these exact same things less than 20 minutes ago. And maybe, you know what, maybe that's advisors saying, nobody's going to watch this for more than 15 minutes. These are the most important things. Work them in when you can. I'm just theorizing there. But Tamara, so your thoughts on ever mentioning the coronavirus response?
well, I don't understand why when they mention, because now a couple times we've heard the Trump administration say we closed the China, we stopped travel from China, and that was a good move. And then Biden, what they need to say is, well, first of all, you did not stop all travel from China. Tonight, Pence literally said we stopped all travel from China. They did a partial ban on travel from China, and that was back at the time when the majority of the cases were on the East Coast coming in from Europe. So by them trying to defend that banning travel from China was a strong stance and a good thing, I don't know why neither Biden or Kamala at this point has combated them with the reality of what that situation was. Yeah, so it's just in Pence's great skills at deflecting, I don't understand why they don't, he needs to just steer away from talking about coronavirus at all, because I don't think he's got anybody except the QAnon people in his corner about a good response to the coronavirus.
Yeah, Scott, what do you think about the fact that do you think that Mike Pence really thinks that the response has been a strength? And I mean, why do you think he was so quick to refer back to it?
Well, partly what you had brought up earlier was not even if people were only going to watch it for certain periods of time, but also just to drill into people's heads. Again, it's part of propaganda to be able to repeat the same thing over and over and over again and talk about it helps to sink it into people's head. And then they start thinking, oh, maybe it's not so bad. And I'm sure there is something, because it's such a personal thing to him as running this task force, that as just a person in general, you feel like, oh, I did a good job. Like it's hard for people to accept the fact that they failed, which clearly they did. And bringing up the ban on China flights is a little ridiculous. I feel they're doing that because they want to play into we're tough on China, and it's the China virus, and they want to keep putting the blame back on China. And since I think it's something like 70% of American voters believe that China is an enemy and not an ally, so part of them continuing on this China ban on flights, which again was ineffectual, and like Tamara said, things were happening in Europe, but actually a lot of countries in Europe and other parts of the world had already shut down full travel from China well before Trump did, days before, and then Trump did a partial ban on flights. So Americans, of course, could still come back and forth who had the virus, who are now spreading it back home. So again, it was not a great ban, but their political thought is, because most people think of China as an enemy and they want to keep blaming everything on China, this is a good strategy, in their opinion, to keep talking about the flight ban, which again, in the real world was not a good thing. And I think that, again, that's why they kept harping on it, because they want to try to change the dialogue on their complete failures on this to make it seem like it was better than it really was, or it could have been a lot worse. And that's what they're doing right now. And I don't think it's going to work. And that's part of the reason why we see states like Florida that are leaning heavily towards Biden this time around, because of the senior vote. And in fact, the seniors are up by +1 in Arizona, which is full of conservative seniors from the Midwest that retired there. And last time, I think it was like +15 for Trump in 2016. So the problem is most seniors are not buying what the Trump administration is trying to sell right now on how badly they failed on COVID. And those are the voters that are more reliable than any other voters. And they're also the voters that are going to be most affected by COVID as well. So it's a very poor strategy. And at this point, I think they're just trying to do what they can to staunch the bleeding of losing more than they hope to do at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think that it is definitely the defining issue, and I think that you could make the case for what the race would be without coronavirus, but it's all hypothetical, because it's very much what we have to contend with. There were a couple of things that I thought were interesting. One of them was I thought that Kamala Harris did a great job when Pence made the point. He said, "You're entitled to your opinion, but not your facts." And she said, "Good line." And then he used it again 20 minutes later, which is one of the things I was referring to. And I feel like it took the restraint that I wouldn't have had. It's like, oh, you really like that line, because she didn't say anything, but it was like, okay, it's clearly like that was market tested. So let's get that one out there. I did think it was interesting. And look, I'm not trying to negate this amount of money, but the idea that the Trump tax cuts led to households paying less than $2,000 in taxes, and their income was raised $4,000. So if both of those things are true and people got $6,000 more, that's great. But I'm going to assume that it's at the expense of, larger companies, not paying like trillions of dollars in taxes. So I thought it was interesting. It's like, yeah, but let's look at these little tiny amounts. What do you think about that? Um, I wonder how much. Look, for the base, you talk about the Green New Deal. It's like saying, like, hey, do you guys like the boogeyman? Well, they want the boogeyman. Do you want the boogeyman to come around? We hate that New Deal. Uh, and I don't know, though. Scott, do you think that the Green New Deal is something that people are familiar enough with that they either think it's important or they're terrified of it, like being terrified of having, a 6-3 Supreme Court?
I think for most people, and just going back to COVID, I think one of the other things that Kamala Harris kind of failed at when Mike Pence kept bringing up over and over is the fact of really just how badly they failed, and the not wearing the masks and having the super spreader event. And those are things that I wish she would have brought up more, just how bad that was. And she touched on it a bit, but she could have done better with that. But I don't think the Green New Deal is going to be any kind of major issue for voting as far as freaking out people or getting people excited, except on the fringes of each side. It'll be red meat to conservatives that are going to go out and vote for Donald Trump anyways, and it's going to be really exciting for people that really want it to happen. But I do believe that this year we are seeing climate change happen in real time, that is making it more real for a lot of voters. When you see the most acreage burned, and we now have a gigafire, the August complex fire in California is now over 1 million acres alone, which is more than in some years of any fires burning all year round. So we're starting to see it happen in real time where people can see that. And the multiple hurricanes that are hitting right now, and we have another one, Delta, we're already in the Greek alphabet, that is going to be making landfall again in Louisiana, in the same area that got hard hit by Hurricane Laura not even 2 months ago. So we're seeing climate change happen in real time that is really affecting people. And so it's no longer an abstract thing. So a lot of people are going to be paying more attention to it. But again, it's still very divisive politically. So obviously that is going to have an influence on some people, but in the middle lanes of the country, a lot of people are just going to tune that part out, or they're just going to go on with their political being of like, oh, it's extreme Green New Deal, and they're going to cut all gas and everything. If you're a Republican and if you're a liberal, you're like, you're not going far enough if you don't pass the Green New Deal. But in the middle, it's really not going to sway too many people that much, unless they're starting to be affected by climate change, which people in the Gulf Coast and the West Coast are really seeing that. And we just had the hottest temperatures on record again in September, after we had the hottest August on record. So it's becoming more real for most people. So it will in time start to influence more voters on a regular basis.
I did think, Tamara, that, Senator Harris is able to give the unique perspective because she talks about committees that she's on and how the actual EPA website took mentions of climate change and the word science out of it. So that's like tangible things that you can point to that, sure, they're minor things, but it's like, yeah, look, I saw these things happen. This isn't just something I read about. This wasn't reported. And I think that Pence has, yes, the talking points of the administration, but those are fairly conservative talking points, that yeah, it's getting hotter. We don't know why, and we don't know what to do about it. And I mean, we've talked enough about it on this show, and it's always like, we can focus less on the why it happened and more on what can we do now? What are things that would help? And even if we don't know if they're going to help, if they're not going to hurt, let's try them anyway. What did you think of how the two candidates handled this issue, Tamara?
Well, it was interesting to actually hear Mike Pence acknowledge. He did say twice, climate change is happening, but then he also said the hurricane season is the same as it's always been. There's nothing unique about the hurricane season. And that's one of those, there are hard fact checks, and then there are easy fact checks. To have fact checked them in real time on the manufacturer when they were both accusing each other of the Biden administration versus, well, the Obama administration versus the Trump administration losing manufacturing jobs. Like that wouldn't have been an easy thing to fact check in real time. I saw it fact checked on CNN afterwards. But as far as the hurricane thing, I feel like Susan could have just chimed in and just been like, no, this is absolutely we have far more hurricanes now than ever before. And it also makes me wonder, like, I keep seeing stories about how small towns along the Gulf Coast are, after each hurricane, are just questioning, like, should we even bother rebuilding or just move? Like, it makes me wonder if that is affecting, since that's Louisiana, Alabama, if that is having any effect on polling in those areas that are facing the direct effects of the hurricanes themselves. So the climate change, I guess his response was exactly what you would have expected. The Green New Deal, yeah, like Scott said, like I don't, or you said too, Christian, like I don't think I don't think his base really know, they have know what it, they don't really know what it is. It's just immediately tied in their head to AOC, and so it's just the Green New Deal. The immediate association is radical left. So as long as he says Green New Deal, they know that I'm supposed to hate that. Not even sure of exactly what it entails.
Yeah, well,
I mean,
it's like saying Obamacare. It's
Yeah.
like you don't even need to know what the flaws are with it. It's just
Yeah.
Obamacare, which President Trump, like how often he says the failing New York Times, it's always Obamacare was a disaster. Like that's always when it comes up, he always talks about how it was a disaster. So I think the Green New Deal is that. And by the way, I do believe that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez did have a nice tweet after the fact that someone retweeted that I saw, and it said, that's Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez to you, because he referred to her as AOC. And I mention it because this is another one of those, like, here's our buzzwords for stuff that we know is really important to our base. The Green New Deal, AOC, these are all things about that they know that are important. I also feel like in general, pro or con, most people don't care about fracking. I do think that fracking is not, it's not even like a top 20 issue. I think that people who understand
except
it,
for in Pennsylvania, which is where Biden is focused right now.
yeah, no, that's a good point. I do know that it's, I do think you're right that that's probably, that might even be the single reason why they're talking about it. I've heard a lot of Democrats say that they're opposed to fracking. I'm not saying I know one way or the other what they've said in the past.
That's one of those things where I'm like, how can you possibly be in favor of fracking? But I guess for the small percentage of people in southwestern Pennsylvania who that is their career.
And other states that, Oklahoma and other areas where that's their career, that's the reason.
Yeah. And that's the exact 5 people, obviously I'm exaggerating, but that's the exact 5 people that this election is dependent on. So.
Yeah. No, and I think that a lot of them definitely hit the issues that they know are important. It was important for Pence to say that he's pro-life, and that President Trump is pro-life, which of course, now at this point in his life, that is an issue that he said that is probably not consistent with what he's said before. And you can make any assumptions you want about how pro-life he would have always been in his life. So, but he knows that it's good politics. Just like clearing a park and holding up a Bible is considered good politics by the president. I do want to move on and talk about some of the other things, but I do feel like there are a few more things that tie into the debate. And I think that there is an issue that probably ought to, when it comes down to, I don't know that how many single issue voters we have, but you do feel like abortion is one of those issues that can be a single issue for people. And there, the way that throwing around the term partial birth abortions and even after birth is something that President Trump has said many times, including last Tuesday, although you couldn't hear it because he was, talking over two other crotchety old men while he said it. And I think to have taken a moment, considering some of the tidying up that Senator Harris did, I feel like it's worth clarifying that you're not in favor of any situation where a child is born and then you tell the doctor like, oh wait, no, I don't want it. Can you get rid of it now that it's born? Because that's what's described, and this is something that is very strongly believed by your diehard conservatives. I know that this issue is important, and I do think it's such an important part of it. I don't know, Tamara, were you surprised that she didn't take a moment to say, like, you throw that term around, but it's not really, it's very misleading to say one partial birth abortions, but also the afterbirth abortions.
I was actually surprised that they spent any time on abortion, because I feel like that's one of those issues that it's just not even worth. Pro-life is going to be pro-life, pro-choice is going to be pro-choice, and so there's no point in. I mean, I feel like we're just reiterating the same thing, but like, especially with abortion, that's not moving the needle in any direction at all. So there was no point in talking about that. But yeah, when he said, Pence said something about late term abortion and all, Kamala, she didn't have a time. She knew that they were going to change topics, but all she just had to do, like, when he said they're in favor of late term abortions, I didn't hear him say anything about afterbirth abortion.
He did. He said partial birth and
Okay.
afterbirth, and that is something that President Trump has talked about. That he described it as the child is born, and they put.
If I were Kamala, she should have said afterbirth abortions. You mean George Floyd? Just any murder of a human life? Like.
Yeah. I don't know. So I think that it was definitely a little bit surprising. Scott, did you find that surprising, or was there anything else that you found particularly surprising during the course of the 90 minutes?
No, I agree with you. I wish you would have touched on it, but part of me at the time when I was watching it was thinking, okay, how much time, and it is difficult when you think, how much time do I have allotted to me? What other topics are we going to bring up? Because it's just so ridiculous. But I thought, my God, that it's so ridiculous, but now you're just letting it sit there. And it is so just completely false. And I saw a lot of people on Twitter at the time post about that too, like, why did she not say this? And of course, a lot of journalists and stuff are saying that's just patently false. But I guess maybe in her mind, thinking of balancing the time that she had left, she was thinking, okay, everyone knows that it's so absurd. And like you were saying, Tamara, like, all right, people are either going to be pro-life or not, and people that are pro-choice are going to know that's just simply not true. And people that are pro-life are going to have some red meat thrown at them, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, of course, they're just murderers, and which they think already. I don't think there was anything else that was surprising me that we haven't already touched on. There were some moments where, again, like Tamara was saying, I think Mike Pence was going to say what he was going to say about climate change. I wish, she would have come back, or even the moderator, and said about the hurricanes and the fact that they're strengthening more, and the more water and the flooding that we've seen from these systems and other points. I wish, again, back to the Supreme Court, that Kamala Harris would have brought up more about the Mitch McConnell stuff and brought it back to 2016 and said, this is what's happened because of Republicans destroying some of the things that we've had, that we've continued to go down this path without blatantly saying about expanding the court or court packing or however you want to call it. But I think it would have been more relevant. I love the point of Abraham Lincoln and everything, but for most everyday voters, they're not even going to put the distinction of the days, and they're not going to care because that was long before anyone that they even know was alive, except for John Tyler's grandson's father. That would have been the only one. So maybe he would have liked to have heard some stories about his dad. But beyond that, I think it would have been more relevant to talk about today and really hone in on the fact that the Republicans have abused that power, and why that it's so important that we wait until after the election. Other than that, it was pretty standard things that both sides did. That
there's a nice back and forth going on in the live chat between our friend Storage Yard Resident, who it's always great to see, and Michael B. They were literally going back and forth about how Trump is America's favorite president, and Michael B. was saying no, he's not. And I jumped in and I said that my favorite is still Taft. And to which Storage Yard said it must be because he was a Supreme Court judge and also a president. And I say, no, it's because I like fat guys. So in all honesty, though, when it comes down to some of these issues that you're talking about, and you're doing good theatrics, like talking about Abraham Lincoln, but yeah, I don't know what that actually accomplishes, and I think to Michael B's point that I actually want to bring up is that, no, they don't have to say what their plan is for the Supreme Court. It becomes very easy if there is a confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett either before the election or after the election, and Joe Biden is elected. Well, then you can point to the fact that Republicans went against the will of the voters, and we feel like it's our duty to now expand the Supreme Court. The fact that it's been this way for 150 years, we didn't want to do this. We told them they should wait. And if Trump wins, then it doesn't matter when they did it, So
exactly,
not something that we'll ever talk about.
I think it would behoove the Democrats to say that the number of who sits on the court, they keep saying it's been the same for 150 years. It's been the same for 150 years, but they don't say, this is not in the number on the bench is not in the Constitution. We've changed it several times. Yes, it's been 9 for 150 years, but it was 7, it was 10. It moved before then.
Or my point would be too, again, bring it back to 2016. Well, Republicans kept it at 8 for basically over an entire year, 8. So there were a lot of tie votes during that time period. And I would keep honing in on that as well, because Republicans changed it technically to 8 when they refused to even have the hearing with Merrick Garland. So they themselves have done that. So that would be an easy way of tossing it right back to them, saying, wow, you guys actually had an 8 for a year when you refused to do this, which now, of course, you're being hypocritical in 2020. But you're absolutely right. I mean, it's not in the Constitution, but beyond that, you could go back and talk about Senate mores that Mitch McConnell has gotten rid of. You could say, well, he got rid of, the 60 votes necessary for a Supreme Court justice to begin with. So there are a lot of things you could do and just have a straight majority. But I definitely agree with you, and I agree with his comment. There is no reason to say anything now. And I also don't believe that they are even consistent on that as well. I really don't. I don't think Democrats are consistent because they don't have the Senate. They need, everything has to come together perfectly. They have to get the Senate, they have to get the presidency, and keep the House. So I think they're not even at the point to even consistently say, this is our message that we're going to expand the court anyways. But you're right, it doesn't behoove them at all. And I still think they want to keep some of those Republican voters that might be nervous about that and not telegraph what they're going to do to make sure they can still keep those Republican voters that are nervous about everything else with Trump and keep, that down on the down low. But you're absolutely right. It was a good tactic by Mike Pence to try to get her to say something. And I think he was better at getting that and making it look like she was dodging it more blatantly than some of the dodges that he did, which he did well more of. But again, yes, I absolutely agree. They should not be telegraphing that at all.
Yeah, and something I was thinking about earlier is when the topic of the health of the top of the ticket came up, Senator Harris did a good job focusing it on Donald Trump's taxes, because she didn't want to talk about, like, well, we don't really want to know everything about Joe. And Pence is like, yeah, we're not going to do that. But that does bring us to if I was the showrunner and we were sitting in the writer's room for 2020, the series, and one of you pitched, all right, but what if Trump gets COVID? I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. No, you're fired. That's such a stupid idea. I would never do that. But yeah, that's the way the world turns, the way the Trump turns. And Scott, I'm going to start with you because you and I had a little text exchange. Do you think President Trump really tested positive for COVID? And what were your thoughts initially, and what are your thoughts now?
Well, my thoughts initially were, and I was on the East Coast at this time last week, so I was reading it fairly late. I think it was like 1:30 in the morning when he said it. But I'll say 2 points. One is he's never mentioned Melania at all in any of this since they both tested positive. Anything about how she's doing, really? I really didn't think that he had it, because I think at first he was trying to play for the sympathy vote and thought, oh, people will feel bad for me and come around and maybe, feel more likely to vote and be like, oh, the poor guy's sick. And then it was all going to be part of the theatrics because that's what he does best. And then he was going to come out with some great new vaccine that he took and he was healed in a day. And all of a sudden now this was going to be out for the election. And, thank you. I'm still not 100% convinced, to be honest. I think it is more likely now because everybody tested positive, obviously. But just the whole thing about it, they still have never been very clear about how he's doing. I mean, clearly it seems he has it. But it took me a while to really come around to it until everyone else.
Yeah. Well, look,
and that's a sad thing where you can't trust him. That's a sad thing where I can never trust what they're really doing because they lie so much.
Yeah, because you said that, and this was early enough on where I felt like I still thought, I'm like, oh, I think he has it. Now, and then the number of people infected was expanded to the extent where you're like, well, it's pretty hard to fake it. But the I'm using air quotes, the recovery was the first time where I'm like, okay, well, maybe he didn't have it, because I was like, wait. He's home and he's back in the not just in the White House, he's in the Oval Office. And, he stood up there and he ripped off the mask, and, this was all filmed and they showed it. And I don't make this comparison lightly. I do think it was a tweet that I saw retweeted. I think it was Bill Kristol, formerly the Weekly Standard. They did a side-by-side of the shots of the helicopter and the landing and him emerging, split screen with Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will.
Yep.
And
exactly. That's exactly what people were saying.
Yeah, and you looked at it and you go like, yeah, that's exactly what they did. So I do think that the Trump camp and Trump in particular felt like this is a triumphant moment where I show that I beat it, and that's going to make everybody think how easy it is to beat it. And I don't think it's had that effect. And I don't, look, I think people, there's a lot of stories, there's close-ups and video zoomed in on where it's like, oh, he's gasping for air. And one of the videos that he made in the hospital, it looked like they edited out a cough. There's little things like that. You're not seeing him a lot. He's not in front of the camera a lot. He's apparently on the phone. He's doing a lot of things, but we don't see him much. And I think that leads to the questions that were brought up by the moderator. We're just like, shouldn't we know how he is? And the fact that we're not getting answers to Tamara, answers to when was the first time you tested positive and when was the last time you tested negative? There's a lot of other questions, but I think those are really the only ones. Like when you're like, oh, we're not going to tell you that, and you just have to say like, yeah, you know what? We're just looking for, we don't really talk about old shit. We're just talking about the new shit. All right. So we're going to talk about what we're going to do now. So I don't know. What are your thoughts just in general, Tamara? And you can start with where I had Scott start. Do you think he really has it?
I do think he really has it. And I think his recovery is probably just the evidence of, the top-notch medical care, better than anybody else in the country would have been afforded to them.
So wait a minute, Tamara, you're saying that if 210,000 Americans were all able to be waited on around the clock by the 12 best doctors in possibly the world, that they might have had a better recovery? Is that what you're trying to say?
Yeah, the death toll would have been a lot, somewhat decreased had everyone had access to A+ healthcare, because Lord knows we've said it enough times. This is a 74-year-old man who is obese and has a myriad of other problems. Um, so on one hand, I'm waiting for him to unintentionally collapse in the middle of a speech, but I'm sure he's going to be fine. I do think I was wondering at first when I asked you guys if we thought he really had it. I was on the fence maybe for the first couple hours of that initial day, but I do think that he had it.
I was first couple days actually for me. It took days, and I'm still not convinced 100%.
Yeah, but
knowing him.
but as far as his administration not answering the question of when was the last time he tested negative, like that's just, par for the course. That he's not going to show his taxes. He's not going to answer that question. I don't think we should even expect him to. In the debate, though, I do think in entirely watching the debate, the thing that I just kept thinking was just that, like, this is such the production of a live television debate is a dinosaur from an era that does not need to exist anymore. This is a holdover from a time when people did not have late breaking news at their fingertips every second of the day. So you actually needed to watch the debate to understand somebody, someone's position that you may not have already been aware of. I don't think that there's anything that was discussed tonight that any viewer watching it was not already aware of. I think that the younger generation, especially Generation Z, that is more, because of the Trump administration, more fired up and more tuned into politics than any generation previous when they were in their early 20s were. I think that if we're going to continue, I mean, obviously not this election cycle, but in the future election cycles, if we're going to continue with having live television debates, in addition to all of the changes that when Gen Alpha and Gen Z gets to an age where they can actually control things, in addition to all of the changes that is going to have to happen in our government, I think live debates, we're going to have candidates answer questions realistically, because the era of when Kamala's asked, you were in favor of the Green New Deal, but Joe Biden has said categorically that he is not going to support the Green New Deal. So how do you reconcile that? And that, that was a question that she changed the subject on. But that is an example of something that I think as Gen Z gets older, that is a question that needs to be answered. You need to be able, candidates are going to, I don't mean they need to answer that question, but it's going to have a lot more weight to be like, yes, I am in favor of the Green New Deal, but I also respect my running mate, or whatever her natural reaction. Were she talking to her husband and answering that question? However she would have answered that, that is the question that America now and moving forward needs to hear if we're going to keep having these debates, because the format and the way the question dodging and the just politicianing is just a remnant of the past that is just completely irrelevant now and moving forward. And so
yeah, I mean, I think it could be more interesting if you had some kind of point system, and there'd also be negative points taken away for, exceeding your time or having to be told to shut up like 3 times. And eventually a trapdoor will open and you will actually be expelled from the stage. And then really the questions will all go to whoever's left.
Or just answer a question realistically.
Well, there's that too. Yeah.
We don't need theatrics. We that's what I'm saying, is that the younger generation just wants, they're more drawn to reality than they are to the presentation and the theatrics. So that's what I'm saying, is that to answer a question realistically, the way that you would answer it to your spouse, that's what's going to win you a debate moving forward.
And we'll move forward in a minute, but in the chat, Charlie Potatoes, a name that I love. Nice to see you, Charlie Potatoes. Trump was breathing like Pavarotti after the climax of Nessun Dorma. I don't know. And I just
wow.
So I had to give credit to that. I love that. But yeah, I think that it is
that old cliche.
That
Pavarotti.
But I think that there are real questions about the health of the president, and they were not addressed tonight. And sort of the idea of, I saw a couple of definitely some more devil's advocate stories that were coming from the perspective of this is kind of what they're hoping for, is the idea of Pence really shouldn't have too active of a schedule right now. Nobody was telling him to not do the debate, but he's going to go out and campaign now in place of Trump and do a lot of in person, and I think some of the rallies and larger events. And and I'd love to be able to say no one wishes this, but when we got President Trump's diagnosis, there were no shortage of look, you can appreciate the irony. And even if you think it, you could stop short of actually writing out that you hope he dies, because that isn't helpful to the debate. Even if you wish that he dies, it's just not helpful. It's going to be a thing that's like can be held up as like, well, this is what they're saying, and as referenced in the debate, obviously, Biden and Harris and everybody said all the right things. But anyway, what a point I was
And
making.
Pence acknowledged. He said, "Thank you for sending your well wishes," or whatever. I thought.
Yeah, and I thought that was there were some good exchanges like that, and there's so the idea that Pence is out there is it should be troubling to some. Because if President Trump is incapacitated and Mike Pence is incapacitated, there is no one. Think of the number of brain aneurysms for the evening hosts on Fox News. I'm talking about the news part of the day, but also the morning show when they have to talk about President Pelosi, because that's your third in line. And it wouldn't take much if President Trump is sick, and the idea that Mike Pence isn't sick now, but now he's going to go out, he's going to be gallivanting around the country, and you hope he doesn't get sick, but you're dealing with the reality of it. And it was not addressed in even a remotely satisfactory way. I think that Kamala Harris gave a very flowery answer to like, well, Joe knows that we believe in the same thing, so I'd be all right to step in for him. So it's like, all right, you gave a good enough of an answer. That was one of those ones where you gave the wrong answer, but you showed your work. So we're going to give you most of the credit on that. But so it's one of those things where it's like President Trump is, having people meet with him from the Oval Office or in the Oval Office. And I think that, Biden has said that there shouldn't be a second debate because the president is sick. And I think you could work up to that. But I think that the point that needs to be made by Biden, but maybe they're waiting for the debate commission. There is no way that President Trump should be on that stage without a mask on. And he'll say he won't do it. But it's like, you have coronavirus. You have it now actively. And your quarantine, conveniently, depending on what day you're pretending that you found out he got it, might end the day before the debate. But it probably doesn't end the day before the debate. So whether or not there should be a debate is worth having. But I think you just start small, and Biden should be out there saying like, yeah, of course I'll still debate him. He's got to wear a mask,
Or just do it virtually. Just do a Zoom
virtually,
debate.
right?
Well, you can.
Or be in two different studios.
Yeah, but so that part's fine, and I guess RFK and Ronald Reagan had a separate, like, bi-coastal debate.
We mean Richard Nixon and John F. Kennedy did.
They weren't in the same place?
Well, correct. On one there, they were in.
I didn't even realize that.
In LA. Yep.
Yeah.
on one of theirs.
See, I didn't even realize that. That
can be done.
the Reagan RFK was the one that I saw. So that's why I knew about that. Okay, but so the point that should be made is like we don't know enough about the health of the president. And I want to know what both of you think. So you both like the idea of doing it virtually. I think you call for him to be on stage wearing a mask because he'll hate that idea more than why don't we just have you on Zoom? You know, he wouldn't like that either. But you're saying, no, you have to stand out in public with a mask and you have very strict rules that as soon as he takes the mask off, the debate is over. Like you cut the cameras, you turn the lights out and everybody goes home because it's like, you know, you don't just stroll out there with a mask on. And the mask argument kind of has to be over now because you're the one who has it. So everybody says about the mask, this is to keep everybody else safe. Well, we know you have it. You're the fucking outbreak monkey. Okay. We don't want you giving it to anyone on that stage. Any of the, you know, and I know there won't be as many people, but this is a town hall debate. There's going to be other people in there. So how do you think the best way to approach this is, Tamara? Do you think just be like, yeah, happy to do it on Zoom, but yeah, I'm not going to stand on stage with the president?
I personally don't want him to have a mask on because you can't. I mean, I just need to see all of his stupid face. Like, I think I mean, obviously, I want everybody else to be safe, but I would think that, you know, just having him in a backstage booth or something, or virtually, or in a isolated chamber on stage, something like that would be better than. I think we need to see his face. So
One
I
of
would
those
be
old
more,
one of those old game show isolation booths.
yeah,
You know, where, yeah,
something like that.
like from Quiz Show. Yeah. Well, there's something to be
Yeah.
said. Yeah, it's not about us seeing anything. It's more about the political chess game of the Biden campaign saying that I don't care that you're the president. You're sick. You need to wear a mask if you want to do this. And because you know that he won't do it. He will say, well, I'm just not going to go. Like, great. That's what we want. We'll be there without you. What do you think, Scott?
I think well, I it's the debate of the debate, right? It's a fine line for Biden and the Democrats to be able to say it, but without it coming across, because again, Republicans are very much anti-mask and anti, you know, do whatever you want. To be able to be spun as to, oh, look at Biden being weak and being whatever. But I agree with you that if he was told to wear a mask, those are the rules, or they both have to wear masks, right? One, it might be a little bit harder to hear them, but I agree with you. I don't think he would say, no, I'm not going to wear it and I'm not going to show up. I think he would still show up thinking he could take off the mask and they would not possibly, you know, shut
Check
down
him.
the debate. But I agree with you. If they actually took that seriously and they shut it down, I just don't know how you do it in a good way when it's a town hall format and you have voters around. I don't know how they do it, you know, because usually in the past you kind of have a theater in the round and you have the voters all kind of 3/4 of the way around you, and you kind of have that opportunity to walk up and talk to them. So how you can do that in this time and make it work in a way that still allows great voter participation and still keeps everybody safe, even with a mask. Like, I don't know if I'd want to be in the room with someone, even if they're 12 feet away with a mask on, knowing that they still have this and that they were part of a super spreader event. So I don't know how the commission actually sets it up in a way where it does have enough where he's distanced enough from everyone else, without having it like everyone's in a big plexiglass aquarium setting. So it'd be very interesting to see how they do it. But I agree with you that if there is some kind of mandate that they have to follow and that both campaigns agree to, and we know that it's going to be safe, and that if somebody flagrantly violates those rules, that they shut down the debate. Like, thank you very much. You know, we're done.
If we're
I
going to
just
do
don't
that,
see
I
that
think
happening in the real. I just don't see that happening though in the real
No,
world.
I don't see it
just don't
happening at
see
all.
them doing that.
What were you going to say,
So
Tamara?
that's the thing.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, I don't see that happening either. But I was going to say, but if we're going to make that a rule, then it should just go for, you know, going over your time. We're going to shut down the debate too. Like breaking
Right.
any of
Right,
the agreed
right.
upon rules, we're shutting down the
Yeah.
debate.
Yeah, but I think that you're putting so much extra significance on the mask, and that's the
Hmm.
point.
Like you shut the
Uh,
mic off if they go
yeah,
over time, but you shut the debate off if he does
right.
something that's
The
dealing with health.
it was brought up, the idea that the Amy Coney Barrett announcement was a super spreader event, and I hate that I can't give credit to it, but I have seen her referred to as Amy COVID Barrett now because of this, and so whomever did that, well played. I do wish it was me,
Right.
because that's
I don't
very
think it
funny.
was one person who started it. That's one of those easy puns that it's pretty much public domain.
Yeah, but I didn't think of it, so
Oh, okay.
I have to not take
Well,
credit.
and the great one with RBG too, where they're like, oh, she went up to heaven and told God, and it was like
Yeah.
her doing too. And you saw she's Obi-Wan, and you saw a lot of
Well,
those things about her going up there, and it
yeah.
was all on her making it
Well, and
happen.
then there was also some about her being reincarnated as that fly that was on his head, which I thought was also funny. But
That is good. I haven't seen that one either.
look, there's the yeah, but it's a valid point, that that event, uh, a portion of it took place indoors, and there was not there were not many masks there, and so it's pointed to that. There are some other things. There are other times where it could have happened. The head of one of the heads of security had actually been rushed to the hospital, which I think brings the total number of people in the administration to like 30. So you can point to a number of things, but the point is, it's like you know you need to actually stop interacting with people, and going to a debate hall in Miami, as much as you want to, because it's an excuse to go to Mar-a-Lago, it's like, it's definitely not what you should be doing, just because it's like the day after you say your quarantine is over. And we have a number of very high profile senators who need to quarantine, all of whom are saying that they're going to quarantine for the prerequisite 10 days, which we all know it's 10 days and not 14. Except, of course, it's always 14. Everyone always says 14, because they all want to get underway for the Barrett hearings. And I think that I guess the problem there, Scott, is that the Senate didn't make the rules that the House did, where they can vote and debate virtually. They have to do everything in person, right?
Correct.
So
Right.
um, it definitely raises questions on being able to vote. And then even for healthy members of the Senate, it was like, I don't want to go there.
Mm-hmm. Do they have to travel?
Yeah, I'm going to go to
Again,
the
it's everyone
Senate.
having to travel, and
Yeah,
so exactly, because they're in recess right now.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know. I mean, I think that look, they're clearly going to move forward on this, but I just I think that before you had all these people getting sick, it was like, yeah, you can rush it through, you can get it done by election day. But I don't know how much it's going to help. But time will tell. We will see. Um, in theory, we'll be back next Thursday at 9 o'clock Pacific after a presidential debate. I'm not convinced that debate's going to happen. I'm not convinced it's going to happen on that night. I think
Mm-hmm.
at the very least it would move to the next night, just because it gives the president an extra day. But he clearly is not going to be told that he needs to stay in the White House. If he immediately was talking about it. But we're so that's when we think we'll be back. But the thing I want to end on is some of these astronomical leads that you see for Biden, as high as like 16. And I was saying before we started that I talked to somebody who I feel like understands this stuff better than I do. And I also follow Dr. Larry Sabato on Twitter, and he always points out that polls are not votes. But you do feel like people who think like, yeah, that number is a little high, but it's like, it's so high that you have to question whether or not it's wrong. And what you hear a lot on the left, and what you hear a lot on the right, and it's a point that I do feel is valid, and I've made it myself, is that a lot of people aren't going to tell pollsters that they're voting for Trump. But I will point out I was thinking about this, that in 2012, you saw the polls and everybody said like, well, yeah, but you feel like people don't want to say they would vote against President Obama. But then as that election got closer, Romney was up in the majority of the polls, Obama had a particularly bad debate, and I think it was significant at that point. So I think that the numbers are so high, it's tough to think that they have to be completely wrong. And the reason why I'm bringing them up is that I think that it bothers President Trump a lot, because even Rasmussen, which is his favorite poll, has him down by, I think, 12. I'd have to look to be sure.
Yeah, I think it was double digits for them as well.
The only one that has him up is Zogby, good old reliable Zogby. So I've said this before, that he doesn't act like a guy who thinks he's going to win. The like barrage of, I think it was 12 tweets in an hour that were all caps, and it was like pro-life vote. It was just all this stuff. It was like, that's just desperate late night text with the X of like, but I don't really think we have to break up, right? Don't you remember this? What about this other thing? You like that, right? Come on. So it's like, it should be a special, there's an Instagram feed that is called texts from your ex. They are these literal exchanges from ex-boyfriends and girlfriends reaching out to ex-boyfriends and girlfriends, and just sort of the ways that usually they're trying to have sex with them, but just the way they reach back out. And I think that these are texts from a soon-to-be ex is the way that we might look at it. And I'm not convinced that I don't sit here the 27 days out and think like, oh yeah, he can't win. I think that he could actually get more votes. I think that there are legal issues that can be raised. You can go that route, but just a simple question, Tamara, do you think that President Trump is acting like someone who feels confident that he's going to win?
No, I think the polls bother him, but I don't know if I think, Trump believes in what is it, the power of attraction, or the new thought. If you envision it and it comes to life, and I don't think there's a single human being on the face of the earth that has worked more in their favor than Trump. I think he is the luckiest SOB on the face of the earth. So I think the polls are what's bothering him, but I do think he thinks he could win and will win, and he may win because he is the luckiest SOB on the face of the earth.
Yeah, absolutely. He got the special 3-day version of coronavirus, the one that goes away right away. It's like a mild case of herpes. Not that I'm saying that he knows anything about that. I'm just sort of throwing it out there. Scott,
right.
What do you think? Do you think that President Trump, one, do you think that the polls bother him far more than he lets on? And do you think he thinks he's going to win?
Oh, 1,000% the polls bother him. That's why he always calls them fake and everything else. And for him, I think it goes back to 2016. He was behind, and he got this sneaky win in that technically, the polls were a little bit, or were fairly accurate, to be honest, in 2016. They had the numbers tightening up at the end, which they did happen, and it ended up being about 3 points, I think they said, and Hillary Clinton won the popular vote by just under 2.5 points or so. So in a way, it was right. He just got the wins where he needed them in such an inside slider thing. But it's a lot different now. And even though we're all nervous, for those of us that do not want Trump to win, thinking we'll get a repeat of 2016, which of course is possible, it's less likely now because people know who he is, and they've seen the type of presidency that he's had and the chaos and other things that a lot of people are very turned off by. Whereas in 2016, and you look again at the likability between the two candidates, and how they were both very underwater in 2016, and a lot of people were just more willing to break and give the opportunity to Trump and say, okay, well, he doesn't have as much political baggage and everything else that Hillary Clinton brings, and we'll try this craziness and see if it actually pans out. And I think a lot of people did that too, not thinking he would ever win. And just like a lot of people sat out that were Democrats, as we've talked about ad nauseum, because it was a third term technically for a Democrat. And a lot of people had 2 terms of Obama and thought there's no way that Trump will ever win. And so they didn't go out and vote. Where we're seeing a difference now where a lot of those people are like, we are not sitting on the sidelines. So the polls do really speak to, there is a wide Biden lead. I think, when you average it out, it's still in the upper single digits. But the polls are going to be fairly accurate, and they have worked on some of the mistakes they had in 2016 by what you call the shy Trump voter, or by the non-college educated rural white voter that may not have gone out and voted before that's going to go out now. And some of that has been factored in, and it really comes down to a lot of people are done with the chaos, and barring any other crazy more October surprises that we saw in 2016, like Comey coming back out and reopening up this investigation on Hillary Clinton, and some things that happened towards the end that really kind of changed the direction in Trump's favor, it's going to be more unlikely that that they're going to be able to close the gap. But then again, at this point in 2016, a lot of the polls have Hillary Clinton close to double digits as well. But we're seeing a different dynamic this time. I think in some states that never were even close for her, like Arizona, for instance, North Carolina, and some of those, again, upper Midwest states, and even Ohio, Iowa, and then you even see Georgia is very close, and Texas. So you see states that were not nearly this close or in Biden's favor this time around consistently that were never in Hillary Clinton's favor. And you're seeing wider leads, like in Florida, where you have a big senior vote. So I think the dynamic is very different this time around than in 2016. That does definitely give the advantage to Biden right now, barring any more crazy October surprises. So the polls are going to be fairly accurate.
Yeah, and look, there have been many surprises. Sorry, Tamara, I'll definitely give you a moment. There have been many. The biggest one, of course, being the president actually getting the virus, and I think that I've said this before, that every once in a while he'll do something that brings me back to this theory that it goes to the Richard Pryor movie Brewster's Millions, where he has a month to waste a fortune, and then I think he gets like $100 million afterwards. So sometimes Donald Trump will do something where you're like, oh, he does not want to win, and he's tanking this because he's like, I don't know, he's placed a wager on Biden winning or something. He's holding like a ticket to the sports book at the Venetian, and when he says that he's not going to negotiate on a new stimulus deal until after the election, you're like, what the hell are you doing? You're supposed to let them be the ones that you can blame, not
Right.
saying like, I'm going to blame me on this. This is on me. I'm not talking to them anymore. And the fact that he very rarely does he do an about face. It took maybe 2 days, but then he was like, just kidding. Yeah. Maybe I'll talk to them. They should really sign these parts of it at least. So I say this for 4 years that I never will say that I can't be surprised again, because I've been very surprised since the last time we did this show only 8 days ago. And I'm sorry, Tamara, what were you going to say before?
Well, an election question. I have 2 questions. First of all, I want to know if you guys got your ballots yet. And secondly,
I did, and they're for sale on
Yes.
eBay. Make sure you find them.
Did you notice they say now there's a warning on them that says it is a federal crime to vote twice? I thought that was,
Which is why I'll be voting 3 times.
Right. They didn't
Because
say
it does not say that it's a crime to vote 3 times.
for more.
but the question I was going to ask is, forgive me, but when do they get to start tallying the votes? When are we, with all the voting that's taking place, when are we going to start getting results
that
rolling
depends
in?
on the state, right, Scott?
Right.
Florida, they start tabulating them right away, or am I wrong about that?
I think they do, but only up to I believe a week or 2. It's not the whole time.
Okay, so it's not right away. And I actually don't know what the rule is for California. I don't know if they can start counting.
I don't. Who cares about California? We know where that's going, but
Yep.
Yeah, but it takes
Trump
forever
country.
to count those votes, though. That's the thing, and that's what it takes weeks sometimes, especially in some of those tighter races that we might be curious about, like maybe California 25, or is Christy Smith going to come back and defeat Mike Garcia? What about the local races with Jack Lacey and Gascon? So those things will take some time. But yes,
Yeah.
certain states like Pennsylvania, they don't start until election day, so everything just sits until then. So it is state by state, which is again why federally you can't really change much about voting, and why Donald Trump can't stop voting or anything else, because it's done on a state by state way and a state by state level. So they're all going to be different.
Gotcha.
Well, we have 27, I guess, if you're on the East Coast, 26 more days until it's election day. So we'll have a little bit more time to talk about all of this. And as I said before, I think we'll be with all of you on Thursday at 9 p.m. Pacific after the debate. And let's see what happened.
Oh, did you just? I can't tell if it's pausing or not.
Oh no, I was clicking onto something, but that's all right. I just want to say thank you to everybody who stayed up late with us, especially everybody in the chat. It was a very lively conversation, and I wanted to make sure I included it as much as I could. So if you would like to keep in touch with us until our next show, you can always find our resident Claudia Conway over on TikTok. Where do people find you, Tamara?
Hey Tamara, hey on TikTok, but I'm gonna be changing my. I would love for all of my handles to be the same, but it's hard when you got to take what's available,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I'm gonna
Speaking
change
from my
handle.
perspective, yeah.
S-Man 80.
Yes, that's right. I can't get it everywhere though, so yes, I feel your pain there. I feel your pain.
And Scott, you're obviously S-Man 80. I'm Christian DMZ, Twitter, Instagram. If you're watching this, you're seeing it on the Blackcast YouTube channel. So please do us all a favor and subscribe. That way you'll, the show's on at odd times throughout the month because of the debates, and who knows what else is, going to make us pop up at a different time. So just subscribe to the Blackcast YouTube channel, BLADTCAST. But if you're here, you just click on it, hit on that subscribe button. That is all the time we have for tonight. But we look forward to seeing everybody next time. Thanks so much. And stay safe, everybody.